All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking something literally every single professional deals with, but honestly, very few ever truly master. We're calling it the alchemy of workplace conflict. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore exactly how to take that everyday, sometimes exhausting office friction and actually transform it from a massive productivity killer into your company's absolute biggest asset.
So right off the bat, I want to ask you a question. Is a quiet office actually a good thing? Because I want to completely prime you for a major mindset shift here. It's so incredibly tempting to think that a total lack of arguments means you have a healthy, highly productive team. We just naturally assume silence means everyone is perfectly happy. But as our source material reveals, that assumption is often dead wrong. Sometimes a completely quiet office just means people have simply stopped caring enough to push for better ideas.
So here is our roadmap for today. First up, normalizing the friction. Second, diagnosing the dispute. Third, the stakes. Fourth, the manager's toolkit. And finally, the power of constructive conflict.
Okay, kicking things off with part 1, normalizing the friction, the inevitable reality. Look, whenever you have people working together toward shared goals, friction is just completely normal. You're always going to have different viewpoints, different work styles, and different ways of communicating. But dealing with this effectively, that demands a massive paradigm shift. We have got to stop looking at conflict as this terrible problem and start reframing it as a genuine catalyst for team growth. Actually leaning into disagreements rather than just sweeping them under the rug is exactly what builds team resilience. It's how you prepare everyone for the next big challenge.
Moving right along to Section 2, diagnosing the dispute. Let's look at the root causes and types.
Now, if you want to treat a problem, you can't just slap a Band-Aid on the symptom, right? You have to treat the actual disease. And in the workplace, there are 4 fundamental root causes hiding right beneath the surface: poor communication, clashing personality styles, differing values, and competition for limited resources. These underlying issues, they just quietly simmer in the background until, boom, they erupt into much larger workplace arguments. But if you can spot these simmering issues early, you stop the eruption before it ever even happens.
So we can actually take all that messy, emotional workplace drama and sort it neatly into a 4-type framework. First, you've got interpersonal, so disagreements between individuals over work styles. Second is task. These are disputes specifically over project goals or methods. Third, relationship. This is the personal friction and animosity from past interactions that frankly has nothing to do with the actual work. And fourth, interdepartmental, the large-scale disputes between different teams over company priorities. By categorizing the tension into one of these 4 buckets, managers can accurately diagnose exactly what they're dealing with.
All right, part 3, the stakes. And trust me, the cost of unmanaged conflict is high.
Because when those root causes are ignored, it creates a massive, massive drain on a vital, invisible resource, your employees' energy. I mean, think about it. Instead of focusing on their actual jobs, your team is spending all their mental bandwidth just navigating drama. And the result? Deadlines are missed, work quality plummets, and overall team productivity just falls right off a cliff.
And ultimately, it gets worse. Unresolved disputes create a deeply toxic environment where collaboration dies and trust completely evaporates. And the ultimate financial penalty for all this? Your absolute best people leave. They walk right out the door, and you are left with the massive burden of finding and training new talent just to replace the stars who refuse to work in a toxic culture.
Which brings us to Section 4, the manager's toolkit. Let's talk about resolution skills and communication.
Harvard Business School experts really hit the nail on the head here. They point out that the foundational mindset for any leader stepping into a conflict is to act as a completely neutral mediator. Your job is not to be a judge handing down a verdict. It's to spot the heart of the problem and treat everyone fairly without ever picking sides.
And to pull that off effectively, managers need 3 absolutely essential skills in their back pocket. First, empathy, genuinely trying to see and feel things from the other person's point of view. Second, impartiality, remaining a neutral helper to both sides. And third, problem solving. And notice it says problem solving, not blame finding. You're looking for answers that help everyone move forward together rather than just trying to figure out whose fault the whole mess is.
So, here is your actual chronological playbook for de-escalation. Step 1, use I statements. It's so simple but relatable, right? Saying, "I feel worried when" completely changes the dynamic compared to just pointing a finger and yelling, "you always." Step 2, practice active listening. Repeat back what you hear so the other person actually feels understood.
Step 3, set crystal clear ground rules for respect during meetings. And Step 4, take breaks. Seriously, if things get too intense, step away, let everyone cool off, and come back calmer. It is simple, but it is highly, highly effective.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the upside. Let's look at the power of constructive conflict.
There is such a stark contrast between ignored friction and managed disagreement. Left all alone, it breeds toxicity and it absolutely destroys trust. But handled correctly, conflict actually acts like a spark. It generates brand new ideas and way stronger cohesion. And that, right there, is the real alchemy of managed disagreement.
Let's break down those real-world benefits: generation of new ideas, improved decision-making, and stronger team cohesion. When you encourage open dialogue and back-and-forth debate, people are forced to think hard. They don't just blindly go along with how things have always been done. This productive friction pushes your teams out of old, comfortable habits and leads them to fully vetted, vastly superior choices. Honestly, they might even spot a critical mistake that everyone else completely missed just because they were too afraid to rock the boat.
And hey, this isn't just a bunch of management theory. Our source material provides a fantastic real-world example. There was a tech startup in Kansas City dealing with a major interdepartmental conflict. Basically, their sales team and their development team were constantly clashing over which features to include in the product. But instead of letting that tension fester, leadership used planned meetings and mediation. They hashed the whole thing out. And the result? They transformed that huge conflict into a shared, unified plan that perfectly matched market needs with what the development team could actually build. They quite literally used the conflict to build a better strategy.
Which brings us to a really provocative thought I want to leave you with today. We started this explainer by asking if a quiet office was a good thing. Well, now I have to ask you, is your team arguing enough to innovate? Because if everyone is just constantly agreeing all the time, you might be completely missing out on the vital friction required for real growth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you start looking at your next workplace disagreement not as a headache, but as a massive opportunity.